From KUOW in Seattle, welcome to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. Today we're spending the show talking about what the future of light rail will look like in our region. Sound Transit is looking at potential cuts and readjustments to its ST3 plan. Voters approved the vision for the next phase of regional transit nearly a decade ago. But last year, Sound Transit announced it was somewhere between $30 and $40 billion in the hole. At a Sound Transit retreat in March, board members were presented with the reality that they may need to drop planned stations or entire lines to Ballard, Issaquah, Everett, and Tacoma. So what happens next, and how will affected communities respond? I'm joined today by a panel of guests. To start us off, Ryan Packer is here. They're a contributing editor at The Urbanist. Thank you very much for being on Soundside, Ryan.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks.
So, Ryan, before we get to sort of the nitty-gritty of this plan, can you level set for us, for people that don't know much about how this stuff gets decided, what is ST3?
So ST3 was a voter-approved package that got the green light in 2016, so a full decade ago, to continue to expand the regional light rail network. It's the most ambitious expansion project that Sound Transit had ever considered before, and included light rail lines to every corner of the three-county regional transit area, as it's called, up to Everett, bringing light rail to downtown Everett, Tacoma Dome, and included a line between South Kirkland and Issaquah on the east side, and then some of the biggest transit projects that Seattle's ever seen, including light rail to Ballard and West Seattle, and a second light rail tunnel underneath downtown.
So it's a big, ambitious plan. Voters said, yes, tax us. We want to build this. Now Sound Transit is looking at this budget shortfall. Can you catch us up on how we got to a place where they are looking at a $34.5 billion shortfall?
Yeah. And so it's important to note that shortfall is through the mid-2040s. And they have over $100 billion on hand. And so it's about a 20% shortfall over that time frame, which is sizable. It's not, but you hear $34 billion and your head kind of explodes.
I stopped to kind of be able to process what these numbers mean at a certain point. They're so huge, but yeah.
And so when you take your finances over that huge of a time frame, small adjustments make a big difference. And so if you have your sales tax projections go down by a little bit, that takes a lot off of that over the full period. In addition, we've had inflation in the transportation sector, particularly skyrocketing, like 70% inflation and is specific to transportation projects in all corners of the country. And then in addition to that, Sound Transit has been taking these projects that have been approved on paper a decade ago and actually designing them and realizing real estate costs are, in West Seattle and Ballard are going up, for example. And they're actually penciling out what it would take to do this line as opposed to just looking at a line on a map and realizing that those costs are a lot higher than they initially had anticipated. So all those factors are converging to that $34 billion number.
And we're going to get to that issue of inflation and real estate and why time is of the essence in some ways when it comes to the cost of building new infrastructure. Really quick before we welcome in some of our other guests here, in broad strokes, the board was presented with three alternatives, options, a menu, whatever we might want to call it here, that would basically reduce service in certain ways to get that $34.5 billion covered, basically. What are the major differences between those three plans so that people can understand what we're talking about?
So the major differences between them, they all kind of represent different philosophical approaches. And it's important to note that they're really not menu options in that you might like to think about menu options. They're just kind of different approaches and ways to think about how the board should make decisions. And so you have the question of prioritizing regional mobility, which is essentially not looking immediately at what is moving forward right now, but what's more important over the long term for regional mobility. And so that option prioritizes South Kirkland to Issaquah over West Seattle. And then you have the approach that looks at what is ready to go. West Seattle Light Rail has federal approval during the Trump administration. So that's huge. And so the question is, should that be prioritized? And then the third option is really even more of a kind of on paper exercise, which is, what if everybody gets a haircut and we don't build any complete lines? What happens then? No one really thinks that's going to happen. Building light rail to Fife instead of Tacoma Dome is something that will make literally everyone unhappy. And so we're not going to do that. But it's sort of like, hey, here's what would happen.
It's been presented, it's like, an unlikely option.
And it's just to kind of give the board and the public an idea of kind of what is on the table.
Yeah. So I'm also here with Tacoma City Council member and chair of the Sound Transit Riders Experience and Operations Committee, also chair of Pierce County Transit, Kristina Walker. Thank you very much for being here, Council member.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So you were at this board retreat when the agency laid out these different visions, shall we say, not a menu of options, but kind of philosophies for how to move forward. Just with your board hat on first, how did that land, and how is Sound Transit, kind of the board, thinking about how to process all these and move forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Ryan, for laying it out so clearly. And I think that was a really accurate description of those three proposals. They did a great job of firing everyone up, because when we said stop at Fife, that's a no. We are not going to take that answer. We're not stopping in Fife. We have to get light rail all the way to Tacoma. So, but in working through that process, it did very effectively get us thinking about what we could do, what is possible, and what the real problem is, right? Because it's so tempting to say, well, let's just find additional dollars. Let's just go to the legislature. Let's just go to the federal government. What we realized at that board retreat is this is a bigger problem than we can just raise a little bit of additional dollars or find a legislative fix for. We have to figure out, as Ryan said, do we do cut a little bit from everywhere, or build some projects and not others? So it was a really effective exercise in that, and again, got the public and communities very fired up, which I think is great. We never hear from communities that they want less transit. We never hear from communities that they want transit later. Everyone wants more transit, and they want it faster, which is great news, right? We are a community, a region that wants more transit and uses it when it's built. So I'm very, very glad that the community has stepped up from all parts of the Sound Transit service area to say we want transit and we want it now. So that is the challenge ahead of us, right? How to deliver to voters. And it's not a if, it's a when. It's how do we figure out how to get there? Because we put that package forward to voters in 2016, and we said we would build transit, and we're going to do that. There's outside factors. It's going to cost us more, so we have to figure out a different way to do it, and that is going to mean some different timelines, but it doesn't mean we're not going to get there.
I want to put a pin in that about other options, moving forward. Turning now to Issaquah Mayor Mark Mullet, who is in the studio here. Hello, Mayor.
Hello.
Well, good to have you back in the studio. So we've kind of heard the community response after these alternatives are put forward to the board from Pierce County. It was I think, am I paraphrasing correctly, a hell no about stopping in Fife.
Yep.
From Pierce County, from Kristina Walker. There are two alternatives that were set forward that say, that there's not going to be that connection to Issaquah. I mean, how did that land with you and your community when you first saw that?
Yeah, I think it got everybody really upset. And so I think to, Councilmember Walker's point, it was a useful exercise, I think, for people to realize this is the time to engage. Even though these projects are scheduled to come to the East Side, 15, 20 years from now, the decisions are being made literally in the next week. I mean, we're going to see a proposal a week from now. We'll have a kind of a layout of what the initial draft is of how we're going to make these reductions. And we've been paying the taxes and light rail in Issaquah. When we had a rally around Save Issaquah Light Rail, the council chambers were the most full I've seen them since I became mayor. I mean, it was overflowing with people saying, we really want this. This is going to be transformative for our community. And I always say I lived in London for 5 years and I worked in New York City for 5 years. I've seen the transformational impact you can have with light rail investments on really creating vibrant communities. And that's what Issaquah wants. And we also have an opportunity in Issaquah to end the transit desert of East King County, because we're the way communities like Snoqualmie, Maple Valley, North Bend, Covington, Black Diamond, they could all have bus connections into the Issaquah stub of this light rail network. And if you don't build it, those communities are going to be left in the dark for all of time. And so this is, I think, really important.
I just want to quickly get to the issue of taxpayer money and who's been paying for this, since it was approved in 2016. Ryan, what is the catchment area or the taxing district that Sound Transit pulls from?
So it's across 3 counties. It doesn't cover the entirety of all 3 counties, Snohomish, Pierce, and King County. It's tightly focused around the urban areas. And so all the way up to Everett and all the way down to DuPont. Yeah.
So a lot of these areas that are not currently served by light rail, but may end up being, within access distance, like you mentioned, Mayor, there. Like if you're, in the Cascade Foothills, you might be able to then, get down and take a bus and access that system. I want to welcome in David Scott, board president of Seattle Subway. David, welcome to the program. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So we've talked a little bit about, the regional responses in Pierce County, in Issaquah. I should say, too, Mayor Mullet mentioned the very popular rally to support Issaquah Light Rail. Everett saw a huge response when people showed up to say, we don't want to miss out on light rail connecting to Everett when they had a town hall a couple weeks ago. David, for those who haven't heard of your organization, Seattle Subway, what is it? And, I think that just kind of connecting your group and how you're involved with what's happening right now with ST3, for people who are listening.
Yeah, so Seattle Subway is an all-volunteer nonprofit advocacy group. We were founded back around 2012 when the ST2 package that was approved by voters in 2008 was well underway. The region was looking for planning the next big step. And initially, the board at the time was the Sound Transit Board was looking at relatively unambitious options that would have followed in the same sort of scale as Sound Move and the ST2 package, which, not to downplay the cross-lake connection that was part of ST2, massive game changer there. But both of those were originally intended as 15-year sort of packages of projects. And it was, my predecessors in my organization who really pushed the agency to be more ambitious and push for having this package go to 30 years and cover all corners of the region.
And so now you look at what has been floated out there so far when it comes to potential alternatives to bridge this budget gap with the Sound Transit Board. Ballard was not realized in any of the options that were put forward. What kind of impact would that have, and how did your group respond to that?
Yeah, so going back a bit over a year when the Enterprise Initiative was first announced by Sound Transit, that was essentially their approach to trying to solve this looming budget crisis that they had realized was a thing around then. So since then, we've been really trying to mobilize across the region. We stand for bringing trains to everyone, and especially the trains that we've already been paying for, that we've already been promised. And so we were really sort of struggling for something specific to latch onto. And so it was when those scenarios came out of the board retreat that a lot of our friends in Ballard especially really got fired up about it. And, in just the span of a couple weeks, my organization joined with Ballard Fremont Green Streets, as well as a number of other volunteers from around the neighborhood. And we put together this rally and march to save Ballard Light Rail. And almost 400 people turned out, including a range of elected officials from around the region. And it was just really amazing to see, and the response to that has been palpable.
And a member of David's team gave me a Save Issaquah light rail sign yesterday at the Sound Transit meeting. They are supporting saving all segments of this network. It was great.
You're a yes and when it comes to transit, I can tell with Seattle Subway. Mayor Mullet, there is something, inspiring about the idea that we can do it all, right? But when it comes to seeing three options or three alternatives or three perspectives, philosophies put forward, and maps that sort of look like we're talking about trade-offs between West Seattle and Issaquah, or, these different, like, let's stop in Fife and then we can do XYZ. It does feel like we are talking about communities competing with each other for getting those stations. Do you feel that way right now? And how do you think about it?
I'm pushing back on that because I think it's a false narrative. I mean, I was on the phone with Teresa Mosqueda this week, and I have a great relationship with her in West Seattle. And I always bring my experience in the Senate when I chaired our state capital budget. Delays do nothing but drive up costs. So I've been, even though I'm here to support Issaquah Light Rail, I've been the biggest advocate of starting West Seattle now because, as Ryan said, it's ready to go. I think my whole message has been, we're coming up with cost-saving ideas that could save billions of dollars, but right now they're on the back of napkins. And we need to get from the back of napkins into actual budget documents with engineering support from Sound Transit, because we do have ideas out there that can save billions of dollars, and I'm really pushing people to look at those. So whatever proposal we see next week, which I don't think will mimic any of the three proposals we saw at the retreat, I think they will come back with something next week that is basically just a combination, I think, as Councilmember Walker said, of what they felt were the best ideas in the various three alternatives. But I think, to me, going forward, it's like, let's get some design money out so we can figure out how to lower those costs. And the debt capacity is a real false constraint. We're delaying how long it takes to get these tail-end projects because of the debt capacity limit. But Sound Transit voters...
Can you translate that for me a little bit? What do you mean by that?
You are limited by how much debt you can issue, but if you get voter approval, 60% voter approval, you can go above the normal state debt limit. And I'm saying, I think we should spend money lowering the cost of the remaining lines, so when we get to November of 28, we can go to the Sound Transit voters and say, hey, if you support giving us extra debt capacity, you can get your light rail 5 years sooner. You can get your light rail 8 years sooner. And that's the conversation I'm really pushing. But until we have real engineering estimates, we can't go to voters and say, give us extra debt capacity. We need to say, hey, Everett, extra debt capacity, you go from 2041 to 2036. We need to have concrete numbers we can tell the voters, if you help us with our debt capacity challenges, this is how much quicker and cheaper you will get light rail. And Issaquah's perspective, and I think everyone on the tail end of this line, whether you're Tacoma Community College, which Councilmember Walker cares about, that line in Tacoma, or you're Kirkland or Issaquah or Everett or Ballard, everyone wants to have ways where they can give voters an options to speed things up. And to me, that's what I really want to make sure, regardless of the proposal we see next week, that we have that conversation going forward, because this is an important conversation to have. And if you want 60% threshold from voters, you have to do that in the presidential year, like November of 28. So the clock is already ticking. So we really have to start getting some real design alternatives, the lower costs. West Seattle costs went from the high $7 billion to the high $4 billion.
Yeah, there were savings for sure.
$3 billion worth, yeah.
Councilmember Walker, I'd love to have you react to that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo this collaborative nature of the project. I know, every community has come out and the media has covered each one individually to say, Tacoma wants light rail, Issaquah wants light rail, Everett wants light rail. But the dynamic in the boardroom is really collaborative, and we're all trying to work through this together and figure out that balanced piece, and appreciate Mayor Mullet's thinking through some of the debt capacity. We've been going to the state to look at bonding capacity. The dynamic, the tone of the boardroom is really collaborative. It's not community against community, because we know a regional rail system not only works when everyone's connected, it's also connecting to local transit and those last mile options. None of this happens in a silo. And that is really, really evident when it comes to these board conversations.
Ryan Packer with the Urbanist, can you help me understand that and contextualize it a little bit? And I know that the goal is that every single community will be connected. And, when we say that these lines might not connect, say, to Issaquah, to West Seattle, or to Ballard, we're talking about delays and not entirely losing those lines currently. But is it possible for everybody to have everything they want at this point? Like, what would that actually take, going back to voters for more taxation?
I don't think we know the answer to that. And so it's important to note that even if a segment of a line or an entire line is deferred, it would still be advanced to 30% design, and we can know a lot more about its costs. As Mayor Mullet just mentioned, West Seattle had billions shaved off by, yes, dropping the Avalon station, but also other design elements that riders will never notice, including shrinking the platform at SoDo, the concourse at SoDo, and other changes. And so Ballard, is not supposed to open until 2039. And so there's a high likelihood that we'll be able to find cost savings. We were able to redesign a Seattle Center light rail station, and making it slightly trapezoidal, and take $500 million off of the cost of the line already. And so that we are looking for that low-hanging fruit. And there's a huge chance, especially with these financing tools that others have mentioned, and they're looking at even other options that they've never considered before, including station area value capture, so kind of getting real estate values kind of captured and sent back into the system. They are looking high and low in areas that they have never done. And so there's a high likelihood that we'll be able to do more than we think right now. This is kind of a snapshot. Is it possible that we won't be able to do everything in the SD3 plan and we'll have to go back to the voters? Yes, that is a possibility.
But I would love to.
Mayor, yeah.
I mean, having looked at these finances for a long time, like the finances as we sit right now is Sound Transit has $7.6 billion in cash, and they only have a little over $5 billion in debt. I think there's a lot of people who are building out the size of the network we're building out that would kill to be in the situation of they basically, you could say, are debt free as we sit here right now, which is why I keep going back saying this isn't about, I don't think it's about higher taxes. I think it's about just acknowledging the fact that we need some flexibility. The state debt limits are there for good reason, but we've never tried to build out, to David's point, a network of this magnitude. We're talking tens of billions of dollars. And the question is, do we want to do it under the current constraints where it could take 3 decades, or do we want to try to speed things up? And I think there is opportunities to have these discussions. But overall, Sound Transit's finances are actually really strong. They're really strong. $2.6 billion a year comes in just from the current tax revenue we have without creating any new taxes. And so there's a lot of things going for Sound Transit. They're actually very positive when it comes to the finances. I think everyone just hears about this $34 billion deficit, but we have to also highlight there's a lot of positives we have going as a region right now, and we just have to really find some solutions.
That's Issaquah Mayor Mark Mullet, and I'm here also with Ryan Packer of The Urbanist, David Scott of Seattle Subway, and Tacoma City Council member and Sound Transit Board member Kristina Walker. We are going to take a very quick break, everybody. Hold tight. We will be back in a moment here on Soundside. Welcome back to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. And I'm talking with a panel of experts about Sound Transit's options for dealing with a roughly $34 billion budget shortfall. The agency's board is looking for potential cuts to stations and lines in the voter-approved ST3 plan. David, I know your group has been closely working with an SDOT former leader, the Seattle Department of Transportation's former director, Scott Kubley, among others, to kind of look at different design options, maybe smaller trains, more frequency in some cases. Can you talk to me about what your group has been, how you've been approaching this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is we kind of look at the system and the expansions that are planned to the link system and see what makes sense. Like, for example, the extension from Linwood to Everett, that's just an extension of the existing line. It doesn't really make sense to consider something wildly different. Same for the extension from Federal Way to Tacoma Dome. Like, if we were trying to, if we had to force passengers to change trains at Federal Way to get to Tacoma Dome, that would just be stupid. We're trying to looking at the kind of things that could make sense. And what really comes out of that is the Ballard and West Seattle sections. those two segments, those could function totally separately from the rest of the system. And this is something that various advocates have been talking about for many years now, because Sound Transit's plan has been to what they've called break the spine. I think they may have changed that phrasing, but that's what they used to call it, where the existing one line, currently it goes from Federal Way to Linwood. So after the spine is broken and after the Ballard and West Seattle extensions are built, the one line would go from Tacoma Dome to Ballard, and then the 3 line would go from West Seattle to Everett. Advocates for a long time have been pushing to keep the West Seattle to Ballard line as its separate thing, and then keep the Tacoma to Everett line as its own separate thing. And so as soon as you talk about like separating the technologies, then you really open up a whole world of possibilities. That said, you don't even need to separate the technologies in order to gain some of the sort of really big picture reimaginings that could really save the $10 billion that we've been talking about. I personally, with help from some of my fellow board members, have been pushing for the agency to consider an option that for the Ballard Link extension, where the alignment through downtown, instead of being a tunnel, would be elevated. That could really save $10 billion on the construction of the Ballard Link extension, which would bring us back to the original $12 billion budget for that line. Now, what Scott Kubley and our other friend Trevor Reed have been pushing is using shorter trains that are fully automated that come every 75 seconds. What that would allow us to do is have trains half the size coming twice as frequently. And that means that our station boxes, especially for some of the really complex deep tunnel stations like Midtown and the new Westlake Interchange Station, would be exponentially cheaper to construct due to requiring half the length of excavation.
So I'm hearing like a lot of major design change proposals, kind of philosophy change proposals coming from Seattle Subway and David right now. Kristina Walker, I'm just curious, in terms of your conversations with the board, are you talking yet about that level of switching gears? I mean, is that on the table, like to truly like reimagine the way that West Seattle Ballard would even integrate with the system?
So everything's on the table, but we have to make a decision here in the next month, and we can't do enough study on these kinds of pivots in the next month. So we have to make a very clear statement as to what we're going to study, what we're going to keep working on. Again, everything's on the table because it's going to take every piece of our system and our budget to meet this crisis. But we don't have time to study it in 4 weeks. We have, it was brought up before, our Tacoma Community College extension. It's a back of the napkin plan and budget. We don't know that that's how much it's going to cost. We think there's tons of cost savings that we could find too. So we need to make sure that we keep these projects alive so we can study them and understand them. So yes, let's turn over every rock. And in fact, at the board retreat, we also talked about, we called them opportunity registers. Where can we save money on operating costs? Where can we save money through policy changes in addition to all these capital questions? But we've seen the study be successful. You all have mentioned it. The West Seattle project is now going to cost us significantly less than it originally did. So yes, let's keep studying all the options and see what's possible so that we can deliver what we said we were going to deliver.
I want to bring you in, Ryan. You know, there was a conversation about in the legislature just this past session about changing the bonding authority that Sound Transit could use and, you know, moving that timeline out to 70-year bonding authority. The legislature didn't go for it. And some of your reporting indicated that partially that had to do with some of the legislators being in districts where voters were upset with Sound Transit. I mean, can you talk to me about voter sentiment right now in some areas and how that's affecting the agency's options?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have lines opening across the region, going to Federal Way, going to Linwood, but there are lots of areas within the Sound Transit District that haven't seen the light rail. They've had express bus service, but not a lot of people directly connect with that as something that they're paying for with the Sound Transit funding. And so there's been some frustrations. And obviously, it's 10 years since Sound Transit 3 was passed, and we've opened an extension to downtown Redmond. But I think there is a lot of frustration around how fast these projects are moving. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that go into that. And so I think that has translated into legislators who aren't exactly rushing to jump at what Sound Transit wants.
I mean, and I would say, Libby, I spent 12 years in the legislature, so I talked to my former colleagues a lot when the 75-year bond bill you discussed, when it failed to get through the House process and it died this session. I think the fundamental challenge was whenever they asked if we support this, what projects are moving up or what's changing? And the answer was always, we don't know. And so I think this is the challenge,
Because there's not enough specificity. People don't know what's on the table, what they're actually going to support. Yeah.
And so I think going into the 27 session, it's going to have to be a completely different strategy to really say, hey, if you give us this additional option, which I 100%, I did all my support I could for trying to get the 75-year bond bill passed. It did pass the Senate, but it did not get out of the House. And but I do feel like there is an opportunity, and people just have to look at it that way as an opportunity to really say, okay, we need to be able to show the legislative body in Olympia, this is the positive changes you get in terms of delivery of lines, because that question they couldn't answer and the bill didn't pass. If you can answer that question in a way that's meaningful to people, I think you can actually have success. I don't think there's frustration, like you say, I think, with voters and in general on some of these issues, but I remain very optimistic that we can still get that bill to the finish line next year.
What matters more to the people in the Sound Transit taxing district? Is it delivering on projects in a timely manner? Is it staying, within the budget and not having to go back to them for more? Is it just knowing what's going to happen, having, some kind of assurances? Like what is the most important thing? I guess
I think it's all three.
Yeah, and all three. Okay,
I
so
think
that's
it's
an
all
easy thing. We just have to do that then, right? I mean,
those can be done.
Yeah. Okay.
Those can be done.
David, I see you kind of nodding there. I mean, when it comes to folks who live in West Seattle or Ballard, there's no doubt that they are fired up. They are really, wanting to see the future of transit include their neighborhoods. But how do you communicate as an advocacy group with, places that will probably never be connected with light rail, but it might get closer to them, or, places that feel like they've been disappointed or things are just taking too long?
When people are upset about how long projects take, we're right there with them. Our mission is simple. We want everyone to have trains. So to, Mayor Mullet's point, we're also pushing a variety of things, right? We're not just this pie in the sky vision, right? We're sort of known for our regional vision map, which does include rail connections to basically the entirety of the Sound Transit regional transit area, which is the taxing district where Sound Transit is able to build things. So, we have a vision that will connect everyone. And in the meantime, we need to work on all of the structural changes, within the agency, within the local jurisdictions, within the state that we can really have an impact on that will allow us to build both our current ST3 projects and the next set of projects that will allow us to build those more cheaply, more efficiently, and, really help us connect our region together.
I'm going to start like a bit of a lightning round here. Do you want to finish that thought, Mayor?
And I think there's an opportunity when you look at like Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson's book, Abundance.
Oh, we got to ring the abundance bell in our studio.
But I think there's an opportunity when it comes to delivering light rail infrastructure. I mean, as a public policymakers, we want to deliver more of what people want. What we've heard clearly in this last few months is people want light rail. And so let's find creative ways. And my message to my fellow mayors is quit asking Sound Transit to show up and pave your streets in gold. Because I think that has been sort of the challenge is all the requests to Sound Transit have been requests that drive up the cost of building lines to their neighborhoods. And we have to completely change that mentality and say, what's the core essentials we need? Like, are there stations we could actually get by without, and go to West Seattle's example with Avalon. And that is, I think, the fundamental change that has to happen.
When you say it's driving up costs, is it because they are, in a NIMBY kind of way trying to avoid certain places, or you're saying it's because they want more stations, or what's driving up?
They could just say, I want a station a block different than the current alignment, and that extra block could be hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think that is happening, and it has been happening as we built it out. And before, we had the flexibility, but now, as David said, this is a much more ambitious proposal we're to now, and we have to change how we're thinking. And my message to my fellow mayors is, let's all be collaborative partners with Sound Transit so we can deliver these lines at much lower price points. I mean, in Issaquah's case, that's using WashDOT right-of-way. I mean, we're right on I-90, and we're saying, don't put the station in the middle of Issaquah, put it in the middle of the freeway. Run down the freeway and connect to the line that hits Mercer Island. Like, let's not cut through neighborhoods, and that's a different approach than what's currently on the map, but it also saves billions of dollars. And I think that's us trying to be collaborative with Sound Transit, and I think if every community in the region does the same, I think we can actually deliver the majority of what was in this ST3 package.
Ryan, go ahead.
I would say that some people would see that as a little penny wise and pound foolish in terms of two-line could completely follow 520, and we wouldn't have Spring District and Bellred in the middle of a neighborhood. The one line could have hugged I-5 at Roosevelt's, and you would have to walk to the underneath the highway to get to your station, but they don't. It goes through the neighborhood where you have a stitched together neighborhood. And so obviously we want to reduce costs, but kind of have to look at the trade-off and the issue of whether actually it's better to have a station in the middle of a highway or in a neighborhood.
You're listening to Soundside on KUOW. I'm Libby Dankman. I'm here with Tacoma City Council member and chair of the Sound Transit Board's Rider Experience and Operations Committee and chair of Pierce County Transit, Kristina Walker. Also with me is Ryan Packer of the Urbanist, Seattle Subway Board President David Scott, and Issaquah Mayor Mark Mullet. We will be back in a moment here on Soundside. Back with more Soundside, I'm Libby Dankman, here with my panel of experts. Kristina Walker, City Council member in Tacoma, Sound Transit and Pierce County Transit Board member. David Scott of Seattle Subway. Issaquah Mayor Mark Mullet and Ryan Packer of the Urbanist, all of us here talking about the future of Sound Transit and the choices that agency has in front of it as it faces a $34 billion budget gap. Big questions about the future of lines to Issaquah, Everett, Tacoma, West Seattle, and Ballard. I want to kind of throw a little bit of hot take here out for the group. This is from Gary in West Seattle. Again, this is a West Seattle resident who says, West Seattle is better served by public transit than other areas of the ST3 network. Rather than building partial branches to Issaquah, Tacoma, Everett, why not curtail the West Seattle expenditure and put those funds towards completing the rest of the system and subsidize bus and road improvements in West Seattle? That's from Gary in West Seattle. Anybody want to take that?
Sure. I can start.
Yeah, David Scott with Seattle Subway.
So, first of all, the West Seattle project is actually the cheapest of all of the ST3 projects. So, even if we were to directly take the money out of the West Seattle project and put it into other parts of the system, it wouldn't get us very far. It would not get us to Tacoma, it would not get us to Everett, and it certainly wouldn't get us to Ballard or Issaquah. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that West Seattle does have decent bus service. It is a peninsula, though. And
we learned that when the bridge went down. We sure did, yeah.
Exactly. And, going back just a couple years to when the West Seattle High Bridge was closed, the number of people absolutely clamoring for that rail connection to get from the peninsula to the mainland was, really, really strong. So, I've also heard proposals, from people saying that Issaquah doesn't need a rail connection. They'll be fine with bus rapid transit. To them, we say, okay, maybe you're technically correct, but you're
not allowed to say that.
There are so many advantages of rail over buses that are non-tangible. It comes from either, Mayor Mullet was saying, the regional connectivity that the end of the line in Issaquah would bring, that in the way that bus rapid transit, Sound Transit already runs express bus service from Issaquah to downtown, and you don't see, people from Black Diamond or Enumclaw reorganizing their commutes around that in the way that you could really see that happening if there were a rail connection.
And I think, Libby, you mentioned you were at the Cross Lake opening,
I
think last month, but we're kind of on pause now. There's no major line currently being built. One big advantage to my mind of going on West Seattle now is it is ready to go. And we don't want to lose, for one, the workforce that's been here working on these projects, and two, the momentum. We want to keep showing progress to the public that, hey, we're not sitting here on pause because we can't politically agree on how to move forward.
Yeah.
We're finding, I think, to Councilmember Walker's point, there's still a collaborative attitude, I think, on the board. And that means, hey, we have a project ready to go. Delays will do one thing guaranteed, and that's drive up cost. And so let's keep moving, and we can get a lot of stuff built here. We just have to be creative.
Councilmember Walker, I mean, we've kind of heard a lot of reasons why the West Seattle residents' suggestion to cut out the West Seattle, plan is maybe not the, most efficient use of funds. What are your thoughts on trade-offs like that?
Well, number one, we have to build the spine. I'm going to say that all day, every day. Tacoma to Everett, we have to get it done. Number two, though, we can do two things at once. In fact, we are doing thousands of things at once as an agency, operating a system that is open and planning and building the rest of it. So I don't think we need to stop one project in order to get the spine done, but we do need to get the spine done. And I absolutely agree. Delivering projects more often is good for the agency. So as we can get these projects online, we should absolutely open them as they are ready. And again, I'll be a broken record about this. It's a system, and it is not an if we build the system. It's a how and when we build the system. So we have to figure out how to do multiple things at the same time, but we do have to get the spine done. That was the original vision. So we have to get that done. We cannot pause those projects, but I think we can do many things at once. We've got very talented individuals in this agency, and to Mayor Mullet's point, we have a workforce that's ready to go. So let's keep going.
Really quickly, something that I always get asked by people in the community or, listeners who write in, if Sound Transit is facing a budget shortfall, what about looking more closely at fare capture? Ryan, do you have any thoughts on that? I'm seeing some people kind of skeptical, but go ahead.
There's definitely interest in fare gates to kind of increase the amount of revenue that the agency's getting at. That has knock-on effects.
Compliance is what, like for fare compliance on Sound Transit right now?
It's kind of hard to say. They say that it's around 90%, but that's the percentage of people who they check, and so I would say it's probably quite a bit higher.
I ride the train almost every day for work, and I have been checked once since they started fare checks.
Yeah,
for years. Yeah.
And fare gates have knock-on effects, actually. So installation of fare gates on the BART system in San Francisco saw a big reduction in the amount of graffiti in the stations, safety incidents. And so there's kind of secondary benefits to that. And the board is clearly interested in trying this out. It's unlikely that we're going to see fare gates at every single one of our stations that we've already built, but simply doing like the 10 busiest stations is shown to have a pretty big impact on the amount of money that would come in, and I think they're going to do a pilot soon.
Is that a drop in the bucket for what would actually make an impact on this budget shortfall, or is that a significant change?
Every drop in the bucket matters.
That's kind of what we've been talking about today,
I think,
right?
to me, the real big thing is, yes, it's tens of millions of extra dollars, and I do support having the gates. But when it comes to legislature being more supportive of Sound Transit proposals, this is actually super important, because their frustration is, don't ask us for money when you're not collecting fares from the people using the system. And so I think there's actually I think Ryan mentioned some of the other benefits, but in terms of getting better cooperation from the legislature, I think this is a huge one.
I know there were equity concerns, and that was part of the conversation here. David or Kristina, I'm we're going to turn the page here, but any other thoughts on that, fare compliance and what it could mean?
Yeah, I think there's opportunities. We're going to look at it in June. So the study is close to being done. Where are we going to do the pilot? How are we going to make the money back? What impacts is it going to have? Which stations? Those are questions we'll be answering soon.
Okay, I'm going to do a round of final thoughts here and what's next. David, can we start with you? What's next for Seattle Subway in terms of your advocacy? You've shared really bold and inspiring plans, and it sounds like, again, the board itself right now is kind of moving forward with what's, kind of on their desks right now. But that doesn't mean that, you guys are very capable of, I don't want to say rabble rousing. What's the best, rabble rousing? Do you like that? Okay, yeah. Great. You're very capable of rabble rousing and, making the seemingly impossible possible. So what's next for Seattle Subway?
Yeah, so we've literally since the board retreat, we've been working, and I really just need to shout out the Save Ballard Rail. All of us see Ballard and Graham Street and Boeing Access Road infill stations as really bellwethers for Sound Transit's ability to deliver on promises for the whole region. And so what we've been doing, we've been working with legislators from the cities, the counties, and the state level. We've been working through all of them to figure out where our advocacy can be most effective. One thing we've been really, really trying hard to push is to get everyone on this collaborative page to really see our vision that we're all in this as one region, that whenever any new neighborhood or city gets connected to the rail network, the entire region wins.
Mayor Mullet, I want to give you a final beat here. I hate to say it, but when I look at the map, when I hear this conversation, it sounds like West Seattle is shovel ready. The spine is basically a non-negotiable for a lot of people. Ballard is maybe going to not be on the table in the current form, but there are a lot of creative alternatives being put forward, and we'll put a pin in that. Issaquah seems like it is the most in danger here. I mean, am I wrong about that? Like, what do you think?
You gotta have more optimism in life. Come on.
I'm an East Side girl. I was born on the East Side, raised on the East Side. Like, I love East Side Rail, but am I wrong? Like, what?
I think the Issaquah connection is actually the cheapest connection left on the map in terms of mile to connect to the network. I think my focus is, if we do get delayed, I think my focus with Issaquah community isn't, don't get too despondent, because what we really want is to get off the back of the napkin. And so we need Sound Transit's support to get off the back of a napkin and into real design documents. And then, too, we want to have these discussions around, debt capacity, because if we can get off the back of a napkin, and we can also say, oh, is there a way to speed things up? Because right now we're being artificially constrained when you go out 10 years. Those are the conversations I'm excited about. So I'm not going into this with any sort of state of depression. I feel cautiously optimistic. The Save Issaquah Light Rail, we started the T-shirts, so we were the first ones to show up. We had purple T-shirts because we're the purple line. And I actually feel that all those efforts our community put forth these last few months, I think they will pay dividends when the plan comes out, because I still think we'll be on there. But I think the bigger argument's going to be, we got to get some money now so we can find out what are the potential cost savings on the east side. And that's Kirkland and Issaquah and everybody.
Councilmember Walker, final thoughts here. I mean, you wear so many hats, obviously, as a city council member, but also on the boards of these transit agencies. What do you think about the decision in front of you and your fellow board members?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I represent constituents in Tacoma. I'm going to fight to make sure we get light rail to Tacoma. Our Pierce County delegation on the Pierce Transit Board is working together really well. So, the whole length of the line and all the projects in between and around Pierce County are on our list. But the challenge in front of the board is always to be both there for your constituents and for the regional system. And that is our charge. And so we have to figure this out together. And as we've talked about, I think there's a way to do that. I think there's a way to make it happen. But we are going to have to say out loud what that solution is. And we can't continue to say everything all the time. We have a problem that it is not able to get everything all the time, right? So, or in the fastest timeline possible. So we're going to have to make those tough decisions. And in my mind, we have to deliver at this point. We've talked a lot. We've told the voters a lot of things. We've promised a lot of things, and there's a ton of things outside of our control, right? As we hit COVID, we hit all these increases in costs. But the reality is we have to deliver to the voters before we ask anything else. And that's the way we're going to build trust, is to deliver the projects and not keep talking about them.
Final thoughts? I mean, I know this is a lot of conversation to wrap up. Ryan Packer of the Urbanist, what should people keep in mind as we await Sound Transit's plan for how to move forward with light rail expansion?
Yeah, I go back to what Mark said. Don't get despondent. In 2026, some of these projects aren't set to open until the late 2030s and early 2040s. If you step back for a minute and think about what's going to happen, regardless of the options that are selected, it's likely that we are going to get a light rail line to West Seattle, Tacoma Dome, downtown Everett, and build a second light rail tunnel underneath downtown Seattle. No other city in the country is doing that apart from maybe LA. And so we're in a pretty good spot. As Mark mentioned, the finances are really pretty good compared to a lot of other places that are not getting any transit moving forward at all right now. And we have the team at Sound Transit doing things that they have never done before and looking at costs and looking at other options. And so I think we are in a better position than the $34 billion shortfall headline makes it look like.
Thank you so much. My panel has been Ryan Packer with The Urbanist, contributing editor at The Urbanist, Tacoma City Council member, chair of Sound Transit's Board Rider Experience and Operations Committee, chair of Pierce County Transit, Kristina Walker, the board president of Seattle Subway, David Scott, and Issaquah Mayor Mark Mullet. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
And that's it for Soundside today. I'm Libby Dankman. If you have feedback about what you heard or what you are thinking about the future of light rail in our region, email the show at soundside@kuow.org or leave us a voicemail, 206-221-3213. The show today was produced by Hans Anderson, with support from Jason Burrows, Sarah Leibovitz, Maliha Syed, and Gabrielle Healy. Our editor is Jed Kim, and we'll be back tomorrow with more Soundside right here on KUOW.